Starchild is an animated pilot created by Mason Anderson. It follows Corey Corbin's and Unixie's adventures in protecting Earth. The show's pilot has been in production for over a year, and watching it really shows how much inspiration it's taken from other art. The animation in the trailers looked a lot like Steven Universe to me, and many of the action sequences seem heavily inspired by anime. And it just begs the question to me, with how much inspiration it's taken from other works, does the pilot have its own identity? Does the pilot bring its own ideas to the table, making it feel new and fresh, or does it just feel like a culmination of stuff we've seen before from other shows? More info regarding that and more right after these messages.
We don't have any messages.
On to the review.
When do I get paid?
Never. Anyway, the best thing to start with is the pilot's story. We start off with Corey and Unixie walking up a mountain. Corey quickly gets bored and tells Unixie how bored he is. Unixie tells Corey how he should focus more on how they must take down the Stray Sprite at the peak of the mountain they're climbing. The scene then cuts to what happened last time a Stray Sprite got into town. The Sprite is shown wreaking havoc before Unixie slices it in half, leaving it dead on the ground. Corey tries to make the situation seem not as bad as it is, and as expected, the people of the town freak out. Immediately, Corey and Unixie's relationship with each other and the town is pretty clearly shown. Unixie seems to take his job of slaying stray sprites really seriously, sometimes at the expense of scaring the town. Corey seems to try and keep up with Unixie's antics and keep a relatively good relationship with the people of the town. Or at least that's what I think. I may be completely wrong, but I don't think being right is what's truly important. What's important is that a viewer can infer all this stuff from this one scene. It's like I already know everything about the main characters and we're barely 1 minute into the episode. Introducing the characters quickly early on and doing it well is something that I find super important to incorporate into a pilot, and I think the pilot accomplishes this excellently. Anyway, Corey suggests doing something entertaining while they travel and asks Unixie how he usually kills time. Unixie promptly responds,
"With a sword, ha-ha!"
I already love Unixie. We'll talk more about the characters later. For now, Corey asks Unixie about what he does when he's bored. Unixie tells him how before he went to Earth to help Corey, he always ruled his kingdom, guiding his comrades to battle and such. To Corey's surprise, Unixie never seemed to have any hobbies or time to himself. Unixie says how he valued doing what was right over having hobbies. And not just because he didn't want to have hobbies, it's also because it's part of being a star sprite. Feeling bad for him, Corey takes out his keyboard and suggests playing some music with him to relax a bit. This scene is very important to me because it really showcases Corey's much more human nature compared to Unixie's much more devoted lifestyle. With the seemingly crazy and restless life that Unixie has, Corey is shown as a more laid-back and human companion that lets Unixie appreciate the little things. The scene really just shows how their dynamic works. Unixie's the brawny, fighting spirit of the duo, and Corey is there to just let them have some fun from time to time and bring an element of humanity to their relationship. Now, Unixie becomes extremely interested in the keyboard, and the two of them get sidetracked by it for over half an hour, which was long enough for the Stray to attack them by surprise. Then Unixie dies. No, he doesn't, but good God, I thought he did. Turns out, Unixie is just a smaller guy controlling a giant suit of armor, which was a little weird to me. I'm fine with how Unixie's a small human-like guy, but none of the trailers for the pilot showed that he was. So when watching the pilot, the reveal of Unixie surviving didn't make me go, "Oh wow, he's alive." It made me go, "Wait, what?" Okay. But it's not a big deal, it's just something that could have been better handled with some better advertising. Corey runs away from the stray sprite as Unixie tries fighting it off with a bunch of ineffective attacks. This entire sequence of Unixie trying to fight this giant beast is just so much fun to watch. There's so much interesting and kinetic movement, and while it does feel just a little slow at points with a couple awkward pauses, it's still really entertaining. Now, after so many ineffective attacks, the tree boss chucks Unixie and he lands on the side of a mountain, completely worn out. Or at least he looks that way. He gets up extremely fast and doesn't have any notable injuries, which is questionable, but it's fine. Corey runs down to him and blames himself for getting both of them distracted. But before he snaps his keyboard in half, Unixie asks him if he can get more instruments. Leaving Corey pretty confused, Unixie tells him to grab his instruments and get back to him as fast as he can. He hands him some sort of teleportation device and begins fighting the Stray again. Corey then tries to use the device but ends up in a bunch of different bizarre locations. This bit was was really cool. Just seeing all the weird, diverse landscapes was really fun. It really gives you a good idea of the world's scope. And so after a near-death experience and a couple of lovely faces made by Corey, he finally makes his way back home. And here is where my least favorite scene of the pilot takes place. It's not an awful scene or anything, but to me, out of the entire pilot, this scene could have been improved the most. Corey tries to silently enter the house, but he's immediately heard by Pam, Corey's mom. She happily greets him, but then asks him why he's soaked in salt water, the water that Corey nearly drowned in. Corey says that he fell into a puddle and was crying all over his body even though it's 34 degrees outside. And when Pam outright says that she was gonna ask him if he wanted to go to the coffee shop but knew that Corey had another lie to tell her, Corey keeps up the act. I'm just not a fan of the cliche where character A makes an obvious lie about something while character B knows that they're full of crap and character A somehow still thinks that they can make them believe this. And what's worse is that when Corey thinks of another lie saying that he's starting a band with his friend Ajax, Corey's mom just believes him. She pretty much forgets that Corey got soaked in super cold ice water and could have caught pneumonia. I get that this is meant to be a joke, but this cliche doesn't make me laugh, it just makes me ask questions and facepalm. We'll be going over this part some more later, but for now, Pam says that Ajax is in the living room as he enters the kitchen. He scoffs at the idea of starting a band until Pam mentions how girls would love them if they started one. Ajax immediately changes his tune and starts to walk towards Corey, saying how their friendship could be better and that he's been a huge jerk to him at times and that he's incredibly insecure about his worth. I actually quite like this part, just how uncharacteristically open and nice Ajax speaks here just because of how he believes that he'll get girls to like him if they started a band. It was pretty funny and clever. It's just that what he says is a little exposition dumpy for my liking. I get that it's meant to be a joke, but I feel like the fact that he brings up topics like how he's been ignorant to Corey at times and how he's insecure about his self-worth makes his dialogue feel unnatural and awkward. I think it would have worked better if Ajax acted more friendly to Corey rather than formal and polite. For example, he'd say something like, "Hey Corey, old pal, a band would be a great idea, it sounds super fun." That way his dialogue would sound more realistic, he wouldn't have to give us a whole backstory, and it still would have been pretty funny. Anyways, Ajax tells Corey to meet him in his garage later, and Corey is able to grab his instruments and get back to Unixie. So yeah, like I said, this scene wasn't awful or anything, but it could have been better. The scene was pretty awkward, some of the dialogue made me confused, and it just moved kinda slowly for me. I think I would have liked it better if Pam didn't believe the starting a band lie and continued to get on Corey's case more and acted more motherly to him. Because that was another problem I had. I felt like Pam acted more like an older sister than a mother. So if Pam asked more questions about what happened to Corey and his well-being, she'd come off as more affectionate. And maybe Ajax would hear Corey say that they're starting a band and interrupts them, and that's what transitions into the conversation with Ajax. The character interactions aren't the only thing I don't like about this scene. They could have also used some background music. The only background noise that occurs during this scene is just the wind from outside and some sound effects, which makes some moments even more awkward than they already were.
I'm kind of busy because I'm starting a band with my best friend Ajax. I need to grab my instruments from my room.
I understand that being awkward was kind of the point of this scene, but to me, the awkwardness just makes it boring and makes me want the scene to be over. And it worsens the introductions to what are otherwise pretty cool characters. Now, back to the actual story. Corey gets back to Unixie and they start playing some music. Here is where I got really confused. I was wondering why they were playing music instead of fighting the monster, but it is explained later. The music isn't super great and it does get kinda cringy at points, but they committed to this song. And it's hard to commit to a song, let alone write and produce it. So I gotta respect the fact that this pilot had a song in it. It was the last thing I was expecting after the scene in Corey's home. And it's really not all bad. There's a lot of creative animations and funny lines in it. It's a good time. And Unixie wielding a microphone as he does a dramatic knee slide is something I never knew I needed to see in my life. And so after a really cool spinning smash to the face, the Stray is finally defeated. Once Unixie's joyous celebration is over, Corey asks him how he knew the music would paralyze the sprite. Unixie tells him how when he saw the Stray didn't have real eyes, he figured it'd use echolocation to see. So their music distorted its sound waves, which completely disoriented the Stray. It's pretty cool that Unixie made a legitimately smart assumption here. I feel like they could have just had Corey scream really loudly out of fear and see that the Stray reacts to it, and that could have been how they found out about the Stray's weakness. But no, Unixie makes a really smart inference that I would have never thought of, and it's a detail I really appreciate. And so Unixie makes a cute little throwback to the beginning of the video, and that's the end of Starchild's pilot. Overall, Overall, it was all very solid, and while it had its issues, it was still thoroughly enjoyable. I want to get to know these characters better. They seem really neat, especially Unixie. Out of all the characters in the pilot, Unixie is by far my favorite. He's very valiant, his voice is super cool, his design is incredible, and despite his very few facial features when he's in a suit, he's still very expressive, making him lots of fun to watch. Corey is also pretty cool, but to me, he's not nearly as entertaining as Unixie is, and it doesn't feel like I know a whole lot about him after watching the pilot. I know a lot about his relationship with Unixie, but not too much about him on his own. But despite that, his passion for music seems really neat, and I would definitely like to see more of him and get to know him better. Pam also seems cool, but again, I don't feel like we got to know her very well. And the fact that she acts kinda motherly to Corey when she was really happy about his friendship with Ajax, but also not very motherly when she didn't seem to care about Corey's well-being a whole lot, made her personality feel a little off. So it's kinda hard to recognize a distinct personality from her. I think Ajax is a fun guy. He's a bit of a jerk, but he isn't completely one-sided and unlikable like a cliche bully character. He can make himself look a little dumb at times, but he's not completely thick-headed. He's also very intimidating, mainly because of his design, but also because of his mannerisms, where it's a little hard to read him. He has his own motives and goals and isn't completely reliant on bullying Corey, unlike lots of other bully characters where they have no reason to exist if the main character is not there. So yeah, pretty alright cast, but there are some characters that could use a bit more depth. Visually, the pilot looks really great. When you really focus, you can tell when some corners were cut, like when a character slides on the floor instead of moving their legs, or when there's a reused asset, but it never takes away from the experience too much. And some scenes can look really nice and almost professional at points. There's a lot of great uses of color, and there's never a point where the backgrounds look bland. I also really like the music that's used. The main theme especially is really fun to listen to. Most of it is very well done. Making your own music must be super hard, and lots of it works with the scenes very well. Now for our million-dollar question: does the pilot manage to maintain its own identity despite its very familiar nature? Yes, it absolutely does. Once again, many aspects of the pilot really do remind me of other shows, but that doesn't mean it's unoriginal. None of the characters here are exactly like characters I've seen in other shows. I haven't seen a story that's like the one in this pilot. I mean, it has Unixie, for crying out loud! The story feels like it has its own ideas, its own style, its own problems. This isn't a ripoff of anything, it's a heavily inspired piece of work, and I would love to see the places this piece of work will go.
I'm actually serious. I'm not gonna leave until you pay me.
Wait, what?
Give me the money.
Well, who even are you? And how'd you escape the basement?